20th CACOR Zoom talk. That's right, 20 talks since mid-April, once a week. I think that calls for a little celebration. And the best way of celebrating that is to have as our speaker today, Art Hunter. Highly fitting that he be our speaker on the 20th occasion, because it was his initiative that we got started so early in the Zoom business. Now, in case anybody doesn't know, Art is an engineer. What he's talking about today has absolutely nothing to do with hypersonic aeronautics, I think. So these days, he's a generalist with a passion, and he has two passions to talk to us about today. Over to you, Art.
All right. Does everyone see my screen share?
No.
Oh, well, we have a small problem then. And
do you want me to put it up, Art?
No, just a minute. I'm trying to do too many things here.
Okay.
And hello, everyone. I'll just share my screen with you, which you should see on your screen now.
Okay.
I'm going to be talking, in fact, this is number 30 of our pandemic Zoom series for the Canadian Club of Rome. And for the first time, it's going to be in two parts, because I have two short things to address. Yeah. Part one is home solar siding, which is big on R&D and is also a showcase. Part two is addressing a home means of decontamination of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this is more a technology showcase with little R&D, but it's of interest to a lot of people. The first part, of course, is this home vertical siding, which is literally taking my house and on a south-facing garage wall and adding this on. This is a collaboration project, R&D project with Roco Industries, and the president of Roco Industries is one of the members that has joined us here now as well. To put this in perspective, I have given quite a number, well, exactly 129 tours of my facility prior to the pandemic. And so it has stopped since that time. I've picked a few of the slides out to introduce the whole project to those who are unfamiliar with it. But here you can see the picture of the south-facing wall of my house, and you can see solar on top. Here is the wall that we're talking about. It is really, quite frankly, it's a cabinet that is tagged on to the house in an effort to hide the meters and things from Hydro One. And I'll show you some of that in more detail. This is the geothermal thermal wall, and that's quite a busy place, but I'm not going to be talking much about it today. The lower left is the control room, and these boxes are 3 Tesla Powerwall batteries that are lined up like a piece of toast, like a toaster with 3 pieces of toast in it. And here in the middle was the heat transfer coil that was going in the ground on the property beside my place. Here is also some performance data, which if people want to know, I'm prepared to do a screen share on some of that. the mission statement for this project, of course, it's a retrofit. Now, there's a difference, of course. If it was a new build, I'd be doing things considerably different. But given that it's a retrofit, I'm tasked with doing things quite differently. But it's a retrofit of an Ottawa home to live a near autonomous lifestyle. Now, it's pretty.
Would you like to make it full screen?
I can do that, as long as this does not.
You just go down to the lower right part of your screen.
Oh, there it is.
Come across
A little farther to your
just
left.
to the left of 67.
It says it's just the thing to the left of the number 67.
Oh, there.
Yeah, that's it. No, just one farther to the right. That. Take it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And the main features here. You don't have it yet?
No.
That's what I
Okay,
was.
just a minute. Just a minute.
Just
Then.
let it go.
Okay. We'll leave it as is.
Okay.
The main features of this project is, of course, independence from independence from the electrical grid, and I put in there largely because I am still connected to the grid. It's not like I'm a hermit on top of a mountain. Of course, independence from municipal water, municipal sewage, storm drains, fossil fuels, and that includes, of course, automotive gasoline. The energy sourcing comes from the sun, the ground, the grid, the battery, and I've said other because there is a I'm leaving the door open for any other ways that can produce energy. Conservation, and I use both active and passive means to manage the demand side. Energy storage is done by electricity into the battery. Thermally, I store energy in the ground, and again, electricity into the grid as well as into the EV battery. Transportation, of course, I have an electric vehicle and a level 2 charging station. Resilience is a feature as well, because I pay a lot of attention to failure modes, and survival is a big item, as well as looking ahead to try and do storm forecasting and to prepare for the worst. Reliability, I can island, which means I can manually disconnect from the grid intentionally. There is also firmware that will do that. And I have done a number of things in terms of hardening the system to survive any climate chaos that should come along. Flexibility, I've got the platform designed all along for collaborations, as well as operation and future growth. And in fact, with going to this solar wall, it's very easy to integrate new capability into the existing platform. I particularly like this slide because it's saying the project is designed to simultaneously demonstrate survival, sustainability, resilience, and thrivability. Remembering that quality of life it's very strongly linked to the amount of energy you use. So on the survival side, of course, one is looking at rationing and compromising quality of life, because you, I like this term, better than dead. You want to survive by meeting basic needs only and outlast. And so there is, of course, built into the system some survival capabilities. Sustainability means, of course, that one wants to maintain some form of quality of life and comfort. And of course, this is the mode that the system operates in most of the time, which is, to maintain a given rate of comfort and level over time, with a little bit of capability to mitigate damage and reduce sacrifices, and don't be too austere, but yet meet obligations. Resilience, of course, is recovery from difficult situations, and one tries to build in as many ways that one can configure the system. Any of you who've been on the tours, you see the number of switches and capability I've got within the garage, and I can take all sorts of grid issues and still survive quite nicely. Thrivability, that's a nice term, but it is really, how can one actually prosper and thrive in the good times? And this is what I'm doing. I'm selling power into the grid as we go, which is helping pay for the capital costs of the equipment to date. The project hardware, it provides for decentralized, efficient, and innovative renewable energy. And of course, I like to call it a living lab, because it's our house and we live in it at the same time as we're using it as a lab. 2013, we bought, in 2014, we bought a 2013 Mitsubishi EV, electric vehicle, and put in a level 2 30 amp charger in 2016. And in March 2017, put in 9.25 kilowatts microfit solar PV. And then in November of 2017, added 3 Tesla Powerwall batteries, which produce or provide 40 kilowatt hours of storage. Isolera were the contractors there. And again, at the same time, the Isolera put in an additional 5.5 kilowatts under the net metering agreement with Hydro One. And that's mainly what is providing all the power to the house today. Geothermal heat recovery and storage was put in with collaboration from Barton Air Geothermal in July 2018. And since then have added in electricity consumption sensors with 3 hydro electricity monitoring system. They're just current sensors that you can put on any circuit. And that gives me a total of 9 channels I can watch. On the AI side, been working with pixel automation through 2019, and of course the pandemic has shut that down pretty well. And as things lift, we'll probably see more activity from them. And I've indicated here as well the vertical solar siding in collaboration with Roco Industries, and it started in this fiscal year. For those of you who have not been here, this is my control room, and these are the Tesla batteries, 3 of them stacked together. And there's a number of monitors and computer assets by the score around in there. This is what the geothermal wall looks like. It's quite a busy place, and I have no intention of trying to explain that to you today. But if there are questions, I can talk to that. Here is a little bit of performance from the electrical side. I couldn't resist it because it was what happened on the 21st of September at equinox, and it ended up being a near perfect solar day. And you can see here's the solar profile that starts, before, maybe a little after 7 in the morning, and it looks like a perfect half sine wave. No clouds. It was really quite nice. And if you say, well, this is really the nighttime after sunset here, and so that's 12 hours a night too. The green line shows the battery providing power, and when it's above the line, it's discharging. When it's below the line, it means it's charging. And you can see a couple of events here, and this was me getting up and making a cup of tea at 6 in the morning. This was the hot water event at 7. And here was another hot water event at 5 o'clock. And then there's another one at 10 o'clock. And you can see the base load that runs 24 hours a day. You can see here that there's a sharp line here. As soon as my batteries are fully charged, they turned off, and this gray area now is energy that I'm providing to the grid for usable credits, which I can use later. So when I use the term off grid, it really means I'm not paying for electricity. And so one has to remember that although the term off grid is bandied about, it has a very special meaning with me. What I wanted to do is show you a test that was done at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology back in March 2016. They put this interesting rig together, and as you can see, it's a structure that is holding pairs of solar panels. They wanted to try and see what the snow would do depending on the slope of the solar panels, and so they picked a number of angles, as you can see here, that represented typical slopes of the roof line that is used in the Edmonton area. They also put in as a test something that was vertical. So these two, which are vertical, are of great interest, of course, to us, because here we are. They put this rig up on top of one of their facilities' roofs and waited for the snow to come. And if you notice, all of them going on up have got snow that stick to them, but not the vertical. I mean, that's not really surprising, but at least here's experimental evidence that says it's not very likely that it's going to stick. What I find interesting about this as well is you can see the reflection of the sun there, which means it's looking pretty well due south. And then somebody went and cleaned the snow off one side, and what they were doing was measuring the performance difference with and without snow. But I'm not addressing that. I'm still saying look at the performance of a vertical solar panel. So here is the cabinet that is tagged onto the side of the garage, and this is the before picture. And it was not very well built at the time, and these doors were actually protruding and sticking out beyond the normal siding here. And so my son and I went to it, and we tore all the siding off, and you can see some of it down here. And no, that's not me, that's my son. And we put on three doors that you can see here just being propped up temporarily, and preparing for ROCO to come along and put their system on. Now, then Roderick and company came along, and here's some steps during the construction phase, and you can see the meters behind where the doors are, and another cabinet. And by the time they put some strapping on and what have you, you know that there's 3 doors there. You have to look pretty close to see the hinge line. But that's just showing you what it looks like. Here is after the installation of all the solar panels that are put on there. Now, we'll talk a little bit about this because this is an R&D program. One of the issues is, of course, there's been some delamination that has gone on, and we'll be addressing all that. The project status, of course, is like everything else. COVID came along and delayed progress. And today we're waiting on an electrician to complete the installation by connecting the solar siding to some of the existing systems. Really looking forward to trying and get a handle on what the solar albedo or reflection off the ground snow will have with the sun low in elevation. And it might be of the order of 20–25%, who knows. I'll try and quantify what that is once we get going. And of course, performance data will be very useful in adding further generation. It has a book value of about 1.5 kilowatts, but we'll see what we really get. Right now, I'm targeting at an off-grid consecutive days of 300 days. Today, of course, is off-grid day, consecutive day number 201. So I've broken the 200-day record this year. 300 days, coincidentally, happens on New Year's Eve. So, but I know we're heading into some pretty bleak solar time in December and definitely in January. And the final comment here is saying that the upgrade to the next manufactured generation of panels is, of course, still undergoing R&D, and until such time as it reaches a manufacturing readiness level. We can talk about that at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, I want to go on to part 2, which is quite different because it's addressing a home decontamination chamber and the technology. And this is primarily more a showcase rather than any hard R&D. And this decontamination chamber is for solid surface cleansing, and it is one way to fight back against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, this virus is known as an RNA virus, and biologists in the group can respond better than I. This is not my field, but I'm told that there's a number of human diseases that are RNA viruses, including the common cold, influenza, SARS, COVID-19, dengue, hepatitis C and E, West Nile, Ebola, rabies, polio, measles. Now, I thought this one was particularly good because it's a scanning electron microscope of 4 virus particles, or COVID virus particles, and you can see the the spikes on it, they're like a hammer or or a club that is sticking out of the particle. And I'm really pleased. I got this off the CDC site. Now, the SARS-2 RNA virus is it's a molecule, of course, and one of the main differences I understand between RNA and DNA is that RNA is a single spiral, whereas DNA is double. And then I read something else that says, well, that's true most of the time, but there are RNA molecules that are double spiraled. And however, I certainly don't want to get into the middle of all that. Suffice it to say that the molecule consists of a number of atoms that are joined together. And if you can energize them enough, that will break the chemical bond and make that particle non-viable. So this is what UVC is actually trying to do. And it is ultraviolet light from the sun. And it comes in 3 different wavelength bands, or at least man has decreed this. UVA and UVB do travel through the Earth's atmosphere with a little bit of attenuation. But this is what causes sun tanning on human skin. UVC, which is the higher frequency, and it's right beside X-rays on the frequency spectrum. And X-rays, by the way, are considered to be ionizing radiation, whereas UVC is non-ionizing. But I don't know any natural process that exists that recognizes humans drawing lines in the spectrum. So we're getting right into quite a dangerous area here. But solar UVC never makes it down into onto the surface because it does get attenuated. So anytime you find UVC, it's man-made. The thing about it is it disables the DNA and RNA molecules. So it breaks these guys and makes them inactive. And if you got the right frequency, of course. So one has to make sure you have the right frequency, and the industry has talked in terms of wavelength rather than frequency. So you'll hear me talk about the number of nanometers in which is really the frequency. And of course, power density, power intensity, and exposure time are quite vital variables in the disabling function. I went and bought a UVC lamp, and this is what the business end looks like. It's specifically engineered to work at 254.7 nanometers, which is where the RNA and DNA molecules are most susceptible and will absorb this energy and cause themselves to disconnect from each other, become non-viable. This guy has 12 LEDs. I operated in a 9 LED mode. And at runtime, the only thing that I've got, now remember that I do not have the capacity to measure the viability or not of DNA or RNA. I do not have the ability to play directly with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The only thing I've got is what everybody else has done who has that capacity. And so I have to say, whatever they found, I assume that that's more or less what I'm getting. And So I'm going to tell you here that researchers have found that they can deactivate 99.9 in an aerosol, okay, with very low exposure at 254 nanometers. And now you'll see this is, of course, in the air, which is different from when you're sitting on a surface. And I'm looking at surface resident particles. And as we said, it adds energy to break the atomic bonds. And another study I read said you can get 90% destruction in 2 milliseconds within 10 centimeters of the lamp. And and this again was an aerosol. It was a flyby. So I then go off and take a look at all those numbers and say, well, I don't have exactly the same conditions as they were testing. So I'm going to do quite a massive overkill, and saying I'm going to, in my chamber, I'm going to run it for a minimum of 30 seconds to solid objects. Like you can put your face mask in there and run it for 30 seconds. And that's something like 1,000 times overkill compared to what these people are doing with an aerosol. Do want to point out that UVC will also damage human cells, plant cells, and your pet. And so it is something that is really quite dangerous. So safety is vital, because you don't want to have accidental exposure to anything other than the target. Everything I read gets me quite concerned about how important it is to address safety. So here is the UVC chamber which I built, and it's in the garage. That means it's isolated from the rest of the house. I can open this door to the outside to get ventilation, and it has 3 levels of light-tight containment, i.e. it is a box within a box within a box. And I've put in 9 levels of interlock, which means it's very, very hard for someone to inadvertently turn this on. I've made it difficult. I've made it complicated, and which includes an app on my cell phone. You don't have my cell phone, you don't have the app, and you don't know how to turn it on, that thing is dead. You can't do anything. And of course, knowledge of the threat is embedded in the operating system. Talked about ventilation and isolation already. I do have warning signage, as well as some LED lights that come on. But the wattage is very, very small. There's less than 20 watts, and I'm running at 120 volts AC, and I got a 5 volt DC transformer in there as well. Now, this is looking at it when it's under full power. I won't go through each one of these, but you can see, it's hard to see the green light here, but you can see the red LED, and the white going from right to left. This is the way you power the thing up. This white switch in the middle is an emergency power off, and it's part of the startup sequence as well. UVC is being generated when this white light is on. There's 2 instruments here. One is a watt meter on the right, and a voltmeter here, and it's measuring the power, or at least the voltage generated in a small solar array that's inside the chamber. And I will show you what this looks like from the back. As you can see that This is a repurposed microwave oven, which I have, and it's described down here that it's the front window is blocked both inside and outside. All the microwave components have been removed, all the hardware, and I've only maintained timer controls, the door shut interlock, the LED that shows the numerical controlled timer, and of course I use their firmware as well, and of course the start button. You can see that down here this is just storage for normal stuff that you store in a garage. I just wanted to have the chamber elevated far enough off the floor that one could access it. Now, because the structure that I built is really the level 3 containment, there is a sliding door, which you can see here in the closed position, and it's quite a snug fit, and it requires any UVC to, oh, look at that, instead of UVD. Anyway, UVC radiation to make at least 3 90-degree right angle turns, of course. And then, even then, if it does escape, it's just looking at the rear wall. Here's a picture of that sliding door in the open position, and you can see the microwave oven, repurposed microwave oven sitting there. Let's just open up the microwave oven and take a look inside. First thing to look at is the aluminum foil, which is intentionally a little bit wrinkled because I want to encourage multiple reflections in multiple directions. And so all 6 sides of that box are covered in reflective aluminum foil. This is the little solar array which I've got in there. And here's the business end back here where this guy is shining when the door is shut directly on the solar, and it's producing a voltage, which tells me that it is actually working. What you're seeing here is a stand. Right now I've got a miniature Canadian flag in there that is undergoing exposure, and to get it to discolor, and that will be another indication that the UVC is doing its job, as it does with all the flags Canadian flags that we have. Now, I just want to show here is the full powered platform, and the white light is on saying things are happening, and this is the last warning sign. But you can see the voltage produced here is 7.35 volts. You can't deduce a whole bunch from that because the object that's being irradiated is causing a bit of a shadow on the array, but it's an indication that UVC is being generated, and that's about all that I can say about that 7.35 volts. On the other side, there is the watt meter, and if you can see the numbers, it's saying it's producing it's using up 4.8 watts when everything but the UVC lamp is turned on. And so here's the next one that says we've turned the UVC lamps on, and it's now consuming 17.8 watts, which means it's actually generating 13 watts of UVC power, which is of course 13 joules per second. Now, after all this, I have declared that the decontamination chamber has passed its commissioning tests and is ready for production decontamination. What I have put in there so far is, of course, masks. I've put in a used book from a used bookstore. I've put in my credit card. I've put in $10 bills and money that I have received, including metal money, and just about anything that will fit in a microwave oven is fair game. Now, that was last August, and I've done some masks for some other people as well, and there'll be more to say on that as I understand more use of it as time goes on. I want to talk about part 2, which is addressing the aerosol in all the exhaled breath that could well be contaminated. And this is more a showcase because there's not very much R&D in this one, because I'm just buying components and putting it in. Here is a UVC lamp, which is on order through Amazon, and it should be arriving sometime this week. And it's produced or uses 36 watts and 254.7 nanometers. I'll be putting that in the cold air return. And of course, the furnace fan should be running when this is running. So I need some means of turning this on and off. So I have also ordered up a countdown timer, and have to come up with a procedure that says when is contamination suspected, and to do it before it happens, during, or after it has happened. And of course, when there are occasions like that, well, they're when visitors come, and that's in terms of our cleaning ladies coming in to do the home cleaning, service technicians, neighbors, grandchildren, or anybody else who as I use the term, when people penetrate the building envelope and exhale. And in any event, that's just a commercial item. And there's the countdown timer, which I'm using, and I've bought, and it's sitting here waiting to be installed. And I'll put this upstairs in a convenient place. And it has, I think, the 1, 2, and 4 hour settings will be used the most rather than 5 or 10 minutes. And then I will spend some time trying to sort out a reasonable procedure to use, and ultimately automate it with the furnace fan, because there's no point in having this guy operational when there's no air flowing by. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to question and answers. I will stop the share.
Oh, thank you very much, Art. 2 topics in one afternoon. I think we'll go back and start with the solar wall. And I'm going to take your privilege, Art, and ask the first question. It seems to me we're all frequently aware of the time the sun rises and the time the sun sets. Not exactly. We didn't necessarily know it was 6:51 a.m. this morning and it's going to set at 6:57 this evening, but we're very conscious of that. At least I am, and I expect most. I'm much less conscious of the elevation of the sun at midday, and I don't very often think of it setting and rising when it's at 0 above the horizon. So with your experience, that wonderful rig at Northern Alberta, and all your thinking, perhaps Roderick as well, if you were designing your house today, what would be the mix of panels on the roof and panels on a vertical wall?
Good question. Let me have a crack at that first, and we'll let Roderick chime in later, because I've got experience with, well, now this is my third winter coming up with rooftop PV, and snow getting on and ice is a major issue. And there's times when the weather is bad, i.e. there's no solar and it's overcast, plus there's a foot of snow and ice on the solar panels. I mean, you might as well not have them. It's you're just stuck. There's no solar coming in at all. Whereas if you got vertical panels, that's not your problem. You're just dealing then with a low elevation angle and of the sun, but you're not completely blanked out. So what ratio I would do? Well, if I was designing new, I would in fact look at putting maybe 50-50%, you know, half of it on traditional rooftop and half on a siding. And Roderick, perhaps you could
Roderick, would you like to come in? Sorry, would you like to ask the question you asked a moment ago and add to what Art's just said?
The ratio, I think it largely depends on really kind of comes down to me, it comes down to like the cost. Sometimes if you have a nice south-facing rooftop wall or rooftop, you can put nice efficient solar panels on and it'll collect good power. Other times, maybe you don't have a very good roof orientation at all, so maybe the balance flips toward more vertical being installed. To me, it kind of comes down to that right balance, because just like a regular solar panel, the more it's pointed kind of more at the sun, more oriented toward the sun and its path, the better production you're going to have. So orientation to me is a big factor that determines that ratio.
Thank you.
Just let me, could I just add to that, John? I'm sorry.
Yes.
That the one thing that you notice that we have 3 doors on that cabinet, and by propping them up at the right angle, we can, you know, take advantage of the sun when it's at its zenith and put it beaming in at right angles to get the maximum amount of illumination from the sun. So there's some interesting experiments which we can run on that vertical panel.
Dave Doherty or Jean, would you like to come in next?
Sure. So my question is with respect not just to things like the solar panels that are outside, but to the entire project for your house. To what degree have you stormproof things? Will you be able, for example, to survive through a hurricane or tornado, both of which we know can hit here now? Do you have, you know, an area cleared around your house where there are no trees? Is the siding and the roof sufficiently strong that it can withstand a very high wind?
Well, good.
And what about flooding?
Flooding's not a problem. We're quite high up from the Rideau River, quite high up. Let's say 3 meters. And if we're got 3 meters of water, Ottawa is completely underwater as well. The your question about the strength of the structure, the only thing that I've done to harden it is when the initial solar panels were going on the roof, we had an option to put a couple more extra struts there to handle the loads, but the building code is really quite resilient. Mind you, a Dunrobin strike by a tornado is going to turn everything into rubble anyway. The only thing that is really important is if the tornado hits somewhere over there and takes out the grid. If it's a direct hit, I mean, all bets are off.
So just a quick observation. Long term, it may well be that things like our building codes need to change so that we start building buildings that are like the concrete dome home.
Absolutely, and I think that and maybe Ted might be able to comment on this more, but we did talk about that when Ted's daughter was giving her presentation, and she had talked about increasing the resilience of buildings and bridges and what have you to ever increasing severe weather events.
Ted, you had a comment on the question of risk.
You're muted, Ted. You're muted.
I'll unmute him if I can.
I was just going to compliment what Dave had started on this, because I think it's a very pertinent idea. But also, have you heard of the Demerara shutters? They are essentially metal shutters that are hung from the top. And they come actually from the northern part of South America, where on a very warm day, they take sticks and just lift them right up so they stick straight out. And then they let them, and if you get a big storm, you bring them down, and they are essentially your storm shutters. And we've been talking to people about the idea of mounting solar panels on them on south and east or south and west facing windows, and using them as being able to aim them at the sun at various times during the day. It's pretty low tech, but if that's your principal source of electricity, as it is in Guyana or Suriname, it's not a bad multiple use device to both, give you shade from the sun, generate electricity, and you can pull them down the next time a hurricane comes by.
Okay, I would like to turn this over to Roderick, because I know he's been thinking of these things. Go ahead, Rod.
Sure. I think what's our current product is sort of it's made sort of to replace vinyl siding, to replace the siding product. For that kind of application, really, it's amenable to it. We could develop a product around that. Wouldn't mind seeing some more detail on the concept.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out ideas, and I'll buy stock if you make them.
Yeah, so like if there is different applications a person could develop. We do actually have designs on making more of a rectangular type design and more of a vertically lined one for more industrial buildings.
Yeah,
we can make different configurations. It's just a shape, We can apply it to. I think, Art, you talked about making a fence with the solar panels on it, and a type of blind for the window. Sure, it's just a matter of putting some time and energy into developing that kind of shape and size and application.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you don't mind, share with Art or something like that, share a link to what you're talking about. I wouldn't mind knowing more.
Well, it dates from experience when I used to live there working for CETA, trying to help people withstand storms and get some development going. I have seen in the Caribbean some interesting examples, including metal shutters with solar panels attached to them. So I just told you everything I know.
Oh, okay. Interestingly enough, we actually submitted a project to Innovation Canada to develop a solar type of window covering.
Yeah.
They had a challenge, and we put together a proposal. We'll see where it goes. But yeah.
Yeah, I was at an nanotech conference in Paris about 5, 6 years ago, and they actually were coming up with sprayable solar panels that could go on any surface. The notion was that they would spray 2 levels on and get their solar production from that, and doing it on existing buildings
Yeah.
and on windows. So I'm not sure how far they've got from there, but it looked pretty interesting at the time.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is from John Meyer.
Okay, you can see my question up there, but I wanted to say something on the orientation, the vertical orientation. That's not efficient. If you had to put solar panels somewhere, you'd want it something like 25 degrees, but vertically can be very grid friendly. The grid is faced with the problem of extreme demand spikes in the morning and in the evening, principally in the morning, more in the morning. So if you have vertically oriented solar panels on an east-facing wall, you're going to take a load off the grid, and that's you're going to really diminish their spike, and that's what they're looking for. They have to provide the service levels for these spikes, and if there's anything that reduces the magnitude of the spikes, they'd be all for it. So that's one large positive of going vertical walls. And I just wanted to ask you what the panels that you're using, I guess, Roderick, for the vertical, what's the efficiency on those?
We're using sun power solar cells.
Okay.
Getting they get about 22-23% efficiency,
Wow.
but we have a surface material that reduces that efficiency a little bit. We're able to achieve about a 21% efficiency.
Okay.
And further to your comment about the vertical alignment, our surface material actually has a very small micro texture. Think of a bunch of little hills and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
It really matters much where the sun's coming from, the angle. We don't have the same angle effect issue for performance than a regular solar panel.
Will they shed snow?
Thank you. John Legg, you're up.
Just to follow up, please, will the panels you've just been talking about shed snow?
Yeah.
Well, we will find out. You know, this
Exactly.
winter.
Yeah,
I'll
we'll find out.
let you
But
know in the spring.
Right.
But they should, because they're pretty vertical.
That's good.
Okay, can you hear me all right, John?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think I only remember one actually, but you referred to 2 hot water events, and that John Meyer just finished also referring to those, and I recall there was speaking of spikes, both were spikes. Now, what precisely did those represent? Was that I got the impression that well, maybe one of them was a shower, and that you were dealing with those what do they call, the instantaneous shower ones, which don't have the blanket around it and so on. And then the other one, I think you mentioned making tea. Well, how, what were you talking about there in terms of seconds? I mean, those spikes looked as though there wasn't much, the heating was not for very long. So that really went over my head. In other words, what was being heated and why did they appear so narrow on your the vertical graph?
Well, that's those are good questions. And what I perhaps might want to do is bring you to, I'll do a quick share screen here again and show you what's happening here in real time. This is what's going on right at the moment. I'm just looking at the solar, and we can see here what's happened with the charging. Now this is not a perfect day again, and here is midnight. And what I have is this peak, which occurs at 7 o'clock every morning, because I have it on a timer that says I'm going to heat hot water at 7 o'clock. So when I have a shower at 7:30, I've got hot water. And there are other events that are on the timer. And I'm just turn some of this off so you can see. This is the consumption pattern for the day so far. And this is the hot water heater coming on, and it turns off once the temperature has reached 45 degrees C. And this was just some power consumption when we turn on some, in this case, the teapot, get its, or the kettle, get it fired up and boiling water, and it's very short duration. You can see a number of other little spikes, and that's even through the middle of the night. If you see, it's not steady here, which means the compressor for the refrigerator is coming on, and some other time it's the compressor for the freezer coming on, because we have a refrigerator and a separate freezer as well. And so you see a lot of base load changes that are happening. Here is another spike that happened when my wife was out in the EV, and she came and she plugged it in. So this is charging it up again. And here is the power being consumed by the oven when she was making some lunch. And of course, this is staying high here because my big computer system with 9 hard drives and three monitors is drawing an awful lot of power, and you can see that there. And if you want to see what's happening here in real time, the solar array is producing 3.5 kilowatts, and right now it's dumping onto the grid because the batteries are now fully charged, and it happened while I was talking, whereas the house is just taking 800 watts. And you can see here the Tesla batteries are 100% charged. Did that help, John, in telling you what's going on?
Very much, and especially that it brought back the time that John Hollins and I were out visiting you, and it's impressive to see, especially with you there, to interpret the monitors, what is going on in real time, and what is going in and what is going out in terms of electricity. So I have one other question, and that had to do with the albedo effect, and you talked about ground snow, and I seem to recall, anyway, please, without losing too much of everyone's time, I think you soon get into what's talked about loss of ice in our Arctic. If you lose the snow, and then so you lose the reflective capability. So then you have pure absorption by dark water, dark blue water. But what I have no idea how that has anything to do with your solar panels, because you talk about ground snow. I mean, it's not the snow that's producing the, I mean, you could just see how lost I am as to how you put albedo effect together with ground snow and production of electricity. I'm lost.
Okay, let me help you here. The term albedo really, if you look it up in a dictionary, means reflection. Right. So it's not confined just to the Arctic but anywhere where there is solar or any radiation whatsoever being, whatever its source is being reflected, even in a mirror, okay? So it is reflection. And in this case, I'm using albedo that says, look, when the sun is just rising, it's low on the horizon, that there is a reflection off the sun that's in the yard beside my house that is being reflected onto the vertical solar array, which never gets reflected onto the panels on the surface, so or up on the roof. So that's all I mean by that.
Okay.
Thank you, Art. Mary, you have a question, I think. Mary Hegan.
Yes, thank you. Art, you've been talking about the vertical solar panels, and I think some of the others have brought up the question of whether with the vertical panel concept, can you do, you know, ground mounts, and can you rotate these panels as well as the more traditional panels to get the most sun during a day or during a season with ground mounts?
Oh, absolutely. You know, all we're talking about here, Mary, is a mechanism that's going to do some sun tracking. And if you can do sun tracking with a regular solar panel, you can certainly do it with Roderick's product as well.
With the verticals. Okay.
If I drive,
just testing.
Sorry, Mary, if I drive down Highway 17 towards Alfred, I will go past an installation where the solar panels are mounted on gimbals, and there's a system to steer the panel so it's facing straight at the sun for as long as it's able. The trade-off there is that it's more costly to build it, and it takes some electricity to move it to follow the sun, but it can be done. It has been done. Now, Mary, if you drive to Merrickville and then keep on going down towards North or Augusta, on the left-hand side of County Road 15, maybe 10 kilometers after Merrickville, you'll come upon a most extraordinary sight. Somebody has built a house. The whole thing tracks the sun. I can't imagine what that cost, and I can't imagine what the energy payoff is, but it's well worth doing. It's not the only one I've passed down southwest of you. So I strongly recommend, on a nice day, tomorrow perhaps, just drive down County 15 and keep your eyes open till you see an extraordinary sight on your left-hand side. Okay, that's enough of me. Dave Doherty, I think, is going to move us into our second topic. Dave?
Unmute yourself, Dave.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to know if you put something into that UVC generator, do you run any possibility of getting damage to whatever you've put in or to the unit? As for example, if it were a microwave, which I understand it's not anymore, but if it were a microwave, I couldn't put anything metal in there. The whole thing's going to start sparking, and next thing you know, it'll be on fire.
Okay. That, yes, it's certainly not a micro. Pardon me. It's not a microwave, but when I talk to radiation chemists, and I ask the same question, because I do know that my flag, which I put out in the summer, it discolors from just ultraviolet A and B, and every couple of years I got to get a new flag because it's lost all its color. And so yes, there is some effect of that radiation on the material. Now, just what that is depends a whole bunch on the material. I know the literature says be aware that you may be generating some ozone, and that depending on what it is you put in, you could be getting some unknown reaction. And my neighbor, who's a radiation chemist, made that very clear to me too. And so this is not totally without risk. And that's another reason to have this device isolated out of the house and where you got some good ventilation.
Any chemical bond can be broken by a photon of sufficient energy. The strengths of the bonds varies substantially. And so what you're doing is you're going with a fairly energetic photon with your UVC here, and that's simply breaking the bond. If the bond in an RNA molecule that you showed us is broken, that molecule no longer functions and is of no risk whatsoever. So Bill Pugsley, you have a question, I think.
Yes, thank you, John. I put a couple of, I put the question up in the chat column, and it has to do with the size of the aerosol particle that the virus is, which I gather is, and I've put the reference, between 0.06 and 0.2 micrometers. Now, this is important. What I'm curious about is how is Art confirming that the virus has been destroyed or removed, if he can do that. And the reason I think this is important is that many airlines and restaurants are using HEPA filters, and HEPA filters only can catch particles bigger than 0.3 micrometers, which is about twice the size of the coronavirus particle, if I can call it a particle. Art is, are you measuring, how do you confirm that the virus has been removed, essentially, and do you do that before and after?
Very good question. I do not have the capacity to do that. Therefore, what I have to do is depend on the researchers who do have that capacity. And I then mimic their frequency. I use their exposure time. I use their distance from the target and say, with this flux density, I'm replicating what they are doing. Then I say, well, maybe not. Maybe it's not identical. Why don't I just let it, as it were, cook for 30 seconds? Whereas they were saying, hey, 200 milliseconds is quite enough to get 90% the dysfunction of the RNA molecule. So I'm going to 30 seconds. And so I'm putting a whole bunch in my hip pocket saying that should do. I have no way of measuring it, Bill. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'm just getting David, alerting Dave, who commented to my comment saying that the COVID particle is small enough to go through mass materials, including N95. So I think there's a lot of claims and trust made out there when it comes to filtering the virus, the aerosol virus.
Well, which is why I kind of like the idea of sticking a UVC lamp in my return air duct.
Sure.
And letting that run, because it is a much bigger in terms of flux density than anything that I've read. You know, it's over 1,000 times stronger than what the people are reporting from the labs. So I'm saying let that run for an hour, 2 hours. You know, it's particularly in the winter where you're recycling this air. All you're doing is reducing the probability of having, you know, viable quantities of the virus in the air you're breathing.
Yep, thank you. I see Dave has got his hand up.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll make a quick comment here. I'm going to go into masks among one of many other topics in the talk that I gave after Christmas on SARS-2. and in quite some detail. Suffice to say that nobody's going to be very satisfied by the stuff that I'm going to discuss. An awful lot of what's going on out there is not informed by evidence, because we're dealing with a novel virus and have had precious little time to do any experiments. Plus, all of the experiments that you might do with people are basically not going to be approved by ethics boards. It's just, nobody will tell you it's okay to go figuring out whether we can infect these people. So major problems trying to figure out just how effective masks are. I can tell you that there's quite a bit of emerging evidence about what goes through a mask, what leaks out of a mask in both directions. And there's a lot of controversial competing evidence.
Dave, is there any?
Thank you. Ted, Catherine's next in the list.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I just want to ask Dave to follow up in that particular question.
Go ahead.
Which is, they've been talking about putting air through things like arts. They've been saying that soap, even Clorox, as Trump is known to say, will in fact disinfect. Now, could there be a device wherein air is taken out of a room, put through something like soap or Clorox or whatever, and then allowed back in? I mean, is that likely to be a practical solution?
I'm sure there are people experimenting with that now, because they would love to be able to come up with something that you could put on the market, I'm sure sell for a lot of money. Dyson, for example, is already doing this with HEPA filter capable units for heating and cooling and filtering your indoor air. And they sell for hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
So somebody's going to get very rich on this. The question about whether it could be done, sure, it could be done. It could be engineered, and probably engineered safely, even if you're using something like bleach, because there are ways to make sure the bleach wouldn't escape the unit.
Yeah.
Well, it's possible.
So have a drink of Clorox.
You just need to remember, Art showed us an electron microscope photo of a single virus, and Dave is suggesting calling it a virion.
Yeah, that's the technical term.
Inside, the virus is composed of a lipid envelope, the sphere, more or less. Lipid, that's a fat.
Yeah.
All it takes is to dissolve the fat. You don't need Clorox.
Okay, well, you're only partly correct, I'm afraid.
All right.
The thing is that the virus really has a number of parts all independently assembled inside the host cell. And the last thing it gets is that lipoprotein envelope that you're calling a fat layer. It's not truly a fat layer, it's a lipoprotein envelope. We don't even know if, when you strip off that lipoprotein envelope, the protein coat and all of those little spikes that are coming out of it, which are also proteins, we don't know whether that remains infective. Nobody's been able to study that yet. So give it another year, we'll probably know the answer to that.
This is not the first virus with these coronavirus. There have been many, and the virus the RNA inside the envelope can only do damage when it's inside a cell of a host.
That's correct.
It cannot connect. It cannot get inside. It cannot.
But it can correct. It can. It can connect as long as those S protein spikes are on the outside of it. It can attach to an ACE2 receptor. It's entirely possible that the viral particle, the virion, can get inside the cell even if it doesn't have that envelope. We do not know the answer to that question. We have never studied on any other of the viruses as far as I can tell.
Okay, we can agree to disagree for the moment, Dave, and I'll invite Catherine to pose her question.
Well, mine wasn't really a question, but I wanted to comment on a couple things. One is that there's a lot of debate about the size down to which HEPA filters will work. I posted in the chat a link that includes within it a study that's from NASA saying that HEPA filters work well within the range of coronavirus. And so I think it's worth looking at the fact that this is another example, as David said, about the fact that we don't really know the extent to which a HEPA filter is removing this particle. Yes, the effective range is 0.3, but it may go down to 0.01 according to that article. And that's from some study in NASA, which I can't say that I've read personally. But my point is the effectiveness of HEPA filters, I think we don't know that they are, whether they're totally effective or not effective. Second point and third point have to do with what we've been talking about the virus particle itself. Number one, in terms of the UVC filtration, all of the nucleic acids, both DNA and RNA, are held together by multiple hydrogen bonds. And UVC is very effective at disrupting hydrogen bonds. So this is what allows them to be extremely effective. They're not covalent. I mean, there are covalent bonds on the side of the molecule, but the hydrogen bonds are one of the critical features of the molecule. So it's not just a covalent bonds that are being disrupted, but hydrogen bonds, which are easier to break and form. So I think that's one of the things about UVC that's really important with destroying an RNA molecule. And then the second thing is what David was just talking about whether or not the virus can still be infective as a particle without its lipid bilayer on the outside. It depends, and we don't know exactly how the lock and key mechanism works on the outside of the virus. So the protein does have to latch onto a cellular receptor, which is the ACE receptor. Some of the viruses then, the lipid bilayer has to fuse with the cell membrane, and then it enters, and then the protein coat that's underneath that is broken apart, and then you get to the RNA. That's basically what it is. It's like a M&M. There's RNA on the inside, then there's a protein coat. It's like the crunchy coated candy, and then the spikes are sticking out on the outside. Again, I don't think we've had enough time to really study what the exact mechanism is. Some viruses are actually taken in by the cell, other ones fuse with the surface. Until we know all those details about exactly how that works, we don't know if it's infective or not. As David said, we're in an early phase. Anyway, I just wanted to say those three things about the virus, the two things about the virus, and one about HEPA filtration that we don't really, I don't think we know. I think the jury's out as to how effective HEPA filtration is.
I'd just like to comment on the HEPA filtration. You know, the smaller you make the filter, the harder it is to blow air through it.
Exactly.
And so this is rather self-defeating, isn't it? In my furnace, I want as much air as I can, you know, being processed through the decontamination. I do not want blockage. And so unless this system is very heavily engineered with the right side, you know, I can see, say in an operating room, you might want to do that, where you go off and you spend an awful lot of money engineering some sort of mechanical filtering system, but certainly not in your home. You're not going to do that. And it's just too expensive to do. And not only that, when you get all those small holes, you know, where air is passing through, you're going to have to clean that filter. How many times? And even, you know, if you're in a hospital environment, you got to have some hygienic way of cleaning that, and on it goes. I would never suggest HEPA filters for the home.
I was a founding member of the National Research Council Division of Radiation Biology in 1965, and that's a long time ago. But having worked in that domain, I'm very conscious of the pioneers in radiation work. And one of those was an extraordinary woman of Polish descent who married a Frenchman. Her name was Marie Curie. And John Legg has a suggestion of how we might like to go and learn a little bit about Marie Curie. John?
Thank you, John. I would say that this may be too late. I noticed that when my wife and I were trying to decide whether we should, which of the two attractive films at the Bytown were going to be shown, we noticed that the one on Marie Curie was playing for a fairly long time. We may be just coming to the end, so you may want to get, and I didn't trust myself to do this while I was watching all of you and Art and the questions and so on, but you might want to get onto your computer and find out if it is still there. But I can tell you it was a fascinating film which showed the history of both of the Curies and how this woman, and I read a few reviews. Apparently, it turns her into a bit more of a, I don't know what the word would be, but she stuck up for herself extremely well on the film, to the point that, you know, she was almost making herself a pain when she needed some favors in terms of borrowing lab equipment and so on. So thanks to Pierre Curie, who recognized the brilliance of her science and who proposed to her, first of all, a scientific partnership, and then after that, of course, a marital partnership. But boy, what an excellent film, and what a bloody hard worker she was, Marie Curie, to get some of this radioactive stuff. And she was the one, by the way, who came up with the word radioactivity. But she worked like a bloody slave to, I think it was pitch blende, and she had to, you know, pay for that to come, I don't know how many thousands of miles or kilometers, and then slowly get that down to some kind of a high enough percentage that she could work on it. And of course, the whole damn thing was extremely dangerous because no one really knew what the exposure needed was to, in one case, to do good things out onto the battlefield in the I guess it was at the end of the, I forget which war, but out onto the battlefield to use a jury-rigged setup, an X-ray machine, to find out, in fact, whether people, some of the wounded, had to be amputated or not, which is a pretty valuable service. But at the same time, there were people who were being, whatever the word is, over-radiated with this stuff that they had no idea how dangerous it was. So sorry to go on, but keep your eye, if it's over now, keep your eye open, because Bytown has the good habit of taking the films which seemed the most popular and bringing them back. So I highly recommend the film, and I hope it's not too late.
Thank you, John. And I believe Marie Curie died of radiation, the effects of the radiation of the materials she was working off, like Röntgen, the man who invented X-rays. We know much better about that, but Art, please be very careful. You're dealing with a different kind of fire here. I think we've come, are there, anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? Ted or anybody?
No, I think it shows how profound we can get into almost any topic and the level of expertise that we have garnished with through this this process. When we started this idea of meeting every week, we thought we had a lot of members of CACOR and associates we could showcase. And this is only, I think, the second time we've had to hit one person up for a second time. And if you just, quite frankly, the discussions on the presentation show just how provocative each of us can be. So I'm not sure what's coming on next. I think the next one we're actually going to do bureaucracy, aren't we?
Ted, thank you very much. Ted, I didn't know we were all that provocative, but I'll take your word for it. So I think I'd like to close by thanking Art for keeping us thoroughly engaged for an hour and a half, to Roderick Costain for joining us, and please make sure that Art must have your coordinates, which were asked for. So he has a way of sharing that with everybody here. So we'll make sure that that happens, and look forward to seeing you all again next week.